Okay, sorry. Okay, sorry about all that. So, let's talk about the code that needs to go into the vertex function in order to get this um, matcap to actually work here. And so, previously I made the mistake of looking at the wrong code that I wanted to add in. It's for something else. So, in general, I just went wrong. So, I have previously created the code, and so now I'm just going to paste it in, and I'm going to explain what it is. Okay, so first, um, comment in matcap texture because you want to explain what this section is. And so you want to do a half to cap chord, lowercase cap, um, uppercase chord. Well, capitalize the first word. Um, Copy and paste it here, copy and paste it here, then do a dot X and do a dot Y here, and it's going to be equal to dot unity matrix IT MB unity underscore matrix dot it dot MB, and you want to put in these square brackets 0, and you want to do the same thing down here, except you put in a 1, and it's going to be a dot XYZ comma, and you're going to want to use the name of your vertex function, which is V, not G. I use G in a different shader, and it's going to be dot normal. Then you're going to do O dot cap is equal to cap chord, and you're going to do multiplication by these two. Now this is basically what's allowing Unity to use a round image as the mapping. It's basically allowing Unity to use a round image to map to the object, basically mapping onto a round object. If you didn't have this, it wouldn't it wouldn't come out right. It wouldn't go around the object correctly. So I think there might be one more thing that we need to add, and it may be a struct. So we need another cap chord. So we need another struct. So let's go half, and I think it was half to cap it's going to be equal to text chord. This is going to be text chord 6 semicolon. The cap text chord is for the cap chord down here. For cap right here. So I think this is everything that needs to go into here. Wanted to check if there was something that said something about a shader model anywhere. I know Unity Cookie talks about that. Okay. So let's see how this behaves. Okay. So let's select the ramp. Okay. Something's not quite right. So that cap strength is not working. Probably because I didn't connect it. So let's see. This is called matcap range. Copy. let's take the matcap and multiply it again, but first multiply it by its range. Let's see what's going on. Did I not define matcap range somewhere? Probably not. I did not define it. So let's do uniform half. No, uniform fix. Oops. Then semicolon. File, save. Okay. Well, that's the first issue. Let's see. What is going on here? Let me grab. Sometimes the issue is actually how you want to set this up. So matcap range times text. So I want to maybe add these together instead of multiplying them together, because I don't want the matcap to go from matcap to black. Okay, that's better. But something is still not right. So let me try my other matcaps. To just check to see if there's anything wrong. Right, there is something wrong. Let me think about this. I think I need to multiply the matcap by something else first. So let me check my old shader. I'm kind of forgetting something. I know I am. Oh yeah, this part. So I have to something has to be done to the matcap so that it's actually respecting the normals. But I forgot about that. So so basically, if you want to create another comment that says matcap map, and then you want to create a fix for, and you just want to create a variable name, so I call it MC, and then you want to go text2d, because that's the whole reason why we have a text2d. Well, whole reason why we have a sampler 2D going on over here. I didn't even call it into the function, so that's a bit of a problem. So you want to go matcap, except for this is a small c, and then you want to go I cap, except for that should be an I think. Well, yeah, it should be an I. It's just input I, so I is correct. So I'm going to pause this here so you can type this up and zoom in so you can see it. Okay. So I'm also going to zoom into this in case you missed it. Okay, so zoom out. Okay, so now let's see what's happening. Still not quite right. Let's see, am I forgetting something? Because I know I have to be. Or is it because his normals don't look right? Is there still something wrong with his normals? Yeah. Again, I'm being stupid. So I go ahead and define something, but then I don't use it. So instead of having matcap down here, instead of using the words mcap, you just want to take that and just call it mc, because that's what we used up here. So you want to add that to the range. You might also change that back to multiplication, basically whatever works better for you. Okay, so now we're finally where we need to be. So so now you kind of see how the matcap is overlaying on his original texture. And as I turn this around, you can see that the matcap is still only respecting the view direction and not the lighting direction, but it kind of is working as a subsurface scattering, though it still kind of looks a little off, and it probably has something to do with where the gradient was at, because it's coming in a little bit too strong. Too much around his chest, maybe a little bit. Let me select another one that I made previously. That one's still kind of bad. No, that one's not the one I want to use. I've created some other matcaps in the past, and they kind of have the lighting source instead of see if I can. Here, I'll show you a better picture of what's going on. So this is the one that I'm kind of using. Instead of having the light source or the lightest part of the matcap being in the middle, I kind of have it towards the top. This is because in general I have the lighting kind of coming from above. I guess this type of lighting would make more sense if the directional light was actually pointing directly at the character. Like, let's say if I had the main directional light facing like this or something, and that kind of makes sense. But if you're going to have like your main lighting direction coming from above, then you might want to change the direction of your matcap. In other words, instead of having the main light being in the center like that, you might want to kind of have it at the top, and maybe make it so it's not quite as dark overall. But I also want to say that, as you can see in this picture, the background isn't black. That's more of a mistake, because when I first was creating matcaps, I was trying to make them look like how they look in ZBrush. So ZBrush doesn't use a black background, and you can probably get away with not having necessarily a black background in your matcap if you are making it in this style. But if you're making it in a style where you don't really see the spear and it's kind of just a gradient, then you want to have the gradient fading into the background. And in all honesty, this is kind of repeating the same problems as you have with a normal n.l function, because the transition is too sudden. You want it to be you want the gradient to be less harsh. So if you were to make another gradient in the future, you might want to do what I did it in the first time around, where I pulled the gradient all the way to the corner, all the way from from the center circle all the way to the, I guess, the most extreme area, and that'll make it less dark. But I will make another matcap the same way I made this one, but I'll just make it like less harsh, so that you can really kind of see how the subsurface scattering is supposed to work. I mean, when I reduce it, you can kind of see how it's you have the shadows here, and then you kind of have a reddish tone, and you have more of the skin tone. The only problem is the skin tone isn't quite showing through enough, because I think the red tone is a little that reddish tone is coming a little bit too close to the center. In other words, this probably needs to be more gray. So maybe also maybe just make the red less saturated would help. So this is basically how you create a ramp, a matcap style ramp. In other words, matcap meaning that it's circular, and it's a ramp as in it's kind of mapping the light. Well, it's not actually taking the light source into account, but it's basically taking the shadows in main lighting area into account. Or we're actually using the view direction instead of the lighting direction in this situation. So I believe, as I showed you before, you have your light direction, and then it bounces off, and you have your view direction, and that's if you're assuming that the camera direction is in the same if your camera direction, which is your view direction, is also facing the direction that your light is bouncing off of. So basically, for your matcap, we're taking whatever direction the camera is facing. It's easier to show it from this side, but like, let's say I'm looking square on this item, so everything that's at the poles is kind of like the furthest that I would be able to see. So basically what we're doing is we're pretending that the light is, that the camera or the view direction is shooting out a light, and we're basically just doing the same thing as we did before with the light direction, so it fades from white to black. Let me just put our new shader on this. Let's see, what did I save it as? Did I not save this right? No, I did. So basically I'm just putting this on a sphere, because it would help it with it would help the illustration. Let's maybe give it another texture. No. Can't seem to find a texture for it. Well, I'll just use that. So the texture is kind of this gray color with a line going through it, and then I kind of darken it and add a little bit of matcap to it. Let's see what happens if I oops, if I turn this into multiplication instead of addition. I think it's probably going to go black. Yeah, it did. But I'm also thinking that I could always add the text color onto it. That's a really weird thing going on there. Let me take a look at the character, see what he's I wouldn't, yeah, I don't think that's the best way to implement that, so I think I would go back to plus matcap and multiplied by the texture. That looks a little bit better. There are always some other mathematical tricks you can use to make it look better down here. But I won't get to that now. That's something that we'll definitely have to explore once we start messing with the specular and the diffuse. So this is a quick, well, not quick tutorial, but this is a tutorial on how you can kind of blend a ramp texture with your base texture so that you still have something that's affected by the lighting direction, but then you can kind of create sort of a fake subsurface scattering. So the texture that you use for your fake subsurface scattering is going to basically control the quality of how good it looks, as opposed to just some of the mathematical considerations that you put in there. Now, on a side note, you can also use this for other effects, like I can use this blue coloring on here, and so you kind of, I can kind of have this really weird sort of blue metallic hue going on, even though it's being multiplied into his base texture. So I can use this for a variety of different effects. Kind of make it look like maybe it's a sunset going on here. So basically you can use the matcap ramp for a lot of different things, including maybe making it a metallic type look. It's really fun. But I do want to warn you that there's some things it can't do. So, like, let's say, okay, I want to suddenly have it so that I can have this texture on here. Like, let's say I want to make it a metallic texture, and then I want to add some rust to it. So you can go with this metallic rust texture type matcap that you created, and then you could bump it all the way up. But if you notice, this doesn't quite look right. It's sort of bent, bit like it's being distorted somehow. This is basically the biggest problem with matcap style ramps. It has a bent effect to it, sort of kind of like some sort of noise, I guess. If I put this sponge texture on here, you can really see what's going on. It just looks kind of like it's radiating around the center a little bit, and if I give you a checkered texture, you can really see that there's something not quite right. Instead of having the texture just overlaying on the character, it's being warped or twisted around. That is because this function down here is basically sort of spinning the matcap around the center. So maybe if you had, and I haven't tested this, but maybe if I had a matcap and it was just simply a wedge, like let's say instead of having a complete circle, I divided it in half, and I just had this little wedge right here. Like, let's say I made it a square, and I had a wedge right here. There's a possibility that it could wrap around, kind of. Well, that's probably not what's actually going to happen. But basically, what's going on is that it's kind of taking certain sections of this sphere and kind of pulling it around. So it's not exactly a one-to-one map. It's not like I'm projecting this sphere directly onto the character. So there's some degree of distortion. Now, if you want to use a square texture, I'll basically do the same thing because I have a square one down here. I mean, you can still keep this code to create a square texture. I mean, you can use a square ramp and still use the same code, but it may not necessarily act how you expect it to, because this is simple, this ramp that's just going in one direction with the gradient going from light to dark, kind of is, most of the lightness is kind of on this side, but then you can kind of see that there's some distortions going on in here. But I mean, it is kind of following the ramp, so it's kind of going, most of the light is kind of, the light side is kind of facing this direction. But as you can see, that's not actually creating a subsurface subsurface scattering skin model, because it's just a linear ramp, so just one side is light. But if you make it a circle, you'll have like the lightness in the center or the lightness around the edge. But as for this square texture, I think it's kind of doing the same thing where most of the light is on this side, and then it's kind of darker towards the bottom. But it's still not like an actual projection. If you wanted to try and get this checkered pattern like exactly on this character, there's another way to do that. And I think I'm going to show that to you at the end of these tutorials for like some of the more, not necessarily advanced, but I'll just show you some of the options and modifications that can be done to the shader at the end of this, instead of creating a separate tutorial all on a square version of a ramp shader. Alright, so this is the end of this tutorial.